you met Axel before? You've got to see Axel here. Hello, Axel. Here's Axel, Christian Erickson. And they don't feed him very well. What do you think? These are boring people, huh? No. Ooh. Must have just been fed or something. He likes the music, yeah. He's just really content. Well, anyway, there he is. Thanks be to God. We just enjoy it. And of course, that's one of the things we'll have fun doing is being with, being down in Mount Lee. We had a choice of which to live with, live up in Rosa or Lago Lee, and we chose Albert Lee. But what we're going to do is during the summer, spend more time in the summer up there, probably in the cabin, and so spend more of the summertime with them. That's our dog up there, the grandchildren. So anyway, that's what's going on here. So it's fun to be in their lives and be connected in this way. As I said, focusing the message that we belong to something bigger. And I want to begin with a story. It's kind of in the spirit of Memorial Day weekend. A story about World War II. And it was about B-17 bombing that made a bombing run over the German city of Kassel, Germany. The B-17 was barraged by Nazi anti-aircraft guns, and the plane's gas tanks were hit. And the miracle was that there was no explosion. And this didn't make sense to the captain that there was no explosion. And then obviously they survived it. So when the plane landed, the pilot, Bowen Fox, after landing the plane, went to the crew chief asking for the shell that pierced the fuel tank. And the crew chief then reported there was more than one shell in the gas tank. There were 11 shells in the gas tank. 11 shells. And none of them exploded. So the crew chief said that the intelligence people came by to pick up the shells. And because as they opened up all the shells, they noticed that there were no explosive charges in the shells. How could that be? No explosive charges in all those shells. They were clean as a whistle inside. But they did find a carefully rolled piece of paper in one of the shells. And it was written in Czech language. And so the intelligence people were looking for someone to translate the note. And finally they found one. The note simply read, "This is all we can do for you now." Which means that what had happened is the Czechs were enlisted to be in the munitions plant for the Germans. And they weren't putting charges, the detonation charges, in the shells. They were just sending them off dust. And they left a note in one of the shells, which ended up in the tank of the plane. Have you read that note? And I guess I use that story to say is that they saw something bigger going on, because the Czechs that were doing that, they were risking their lives. Because if the Germans had found out, they would have been shot on the spot. But they risked their lives not to put the explosive charges in the shells. I wonder how many they did with it. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. But they knew, the Czechs knew, they belonged to something bigger. They knew they belonged to something bigger, to overcome the Nazi regime. In the same way, I guess, you think of that insignificance. You think of the disciples too belonging to something bigger. And this is what Jesus reveals in the prayer of the Gospel of John. There's something bigger, and the truth is it comes in the Word. Jesus says, "Sanctify them in the truth, the Word is truth." That is, we're something bigger, part of something bigger, and that's the Word that brings forgiveness in our lives. The Word of truth that says our sins are forgiven, and that truth says that God makes it possible for you to let go of grudges, resentments, fears, and to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go of the weight of sin. And to let go hurts all the things that prevent you from being fully what God intended you to be. So as people of faith, we belong to something bigger. You don't belong to this world. And when Jesus referred to the world, what did he mean? What did he mean? And really what it meant is that the world for Jesus meant the non-believing world. When he said world, it was the non-believing world. So anytime you see the world used in the Gospel of John, it's the non-believing world. And he says you don't belong to this world. Jesus says you don't belong to this world. But on the other hand, he doesn't tell us that we should reject the world, or that we should despise the world or hate the world. Because it says in John 3, you're familiar with it, God so loved the world, the unbelieving world, that he gave his only begotten Son. So he loved the world, gave his life for the world, the unbelieving world, that they might know Christ. And so he says what you need to know, we all need to know, is we need to know our place of origin. And our place of origin as Christians is God's grace and his forgiveness. That's where our roots are. That's where everything begins for us. And he's saying we need to know where we come from and know our place of origin. Just this last Friday and Saturday, Friday night and Saturday afternoon, I had the funeral for Charles Lind Saturday morning. But then Saturday afternoon, I was able to zip back to Northfield, Minnesota, at St. Olaf College to participate in some of the activities. And we've got a chance to plant some shrubs and all that kind of stuff as part of our class. That was really neat thing for us to share. But anyway, I had the privilege, and of course, of participating in this class. And one thing I noticed, that all of the classmates of mine were really old. And it was really disappointing to see how old they all were. They were highly recognizable. Of course, I was totally recognizable. And I don't know what the problem was then for them. But I visited with several people, and it was a great experience to sit down with some of them and share all the things that we had experienced together. Mark Hansen was one who he was a roommate of mine for a year or so, plus he was my freshman quarter, so we knew each other pretty well. He's a medical doctor out in Seattle now. And we sat down and talked for a long time. We would go to Detroit. 2 summers ago, we drove to Detroit and worked in plants. You know, all these guys that work in there would take vacations, and then they'd need students to come in and do the work and stuff. So we'd make a lot of money coming in and working there. And we drove, we were trying to decide what year the Chevrolet was. It was a smashed-in front end. And windshields worked off and on. We took the northern water of Lake Superior, and the windshield wipers would be on for a while, they'd be off for a while. So the time went off, we'd have to stick our heads up to see where we were going. And, you know, all that kind of stuff, we're recalling all these crazy things that went on. But what it felt like when we were doing this is that we were coming back to our roots. We're coming back to a very familiar place where we shared significant experience at the time. You know, that was a wonderful privilege to be going to school and to share with these people and get to know them and get connected and to share a common origin. And it was so great to come back to those roots and reclaim them and celebrate them. It was just a wonderful time. Well, I think it's the same thing with Christians. When we come here, we celebrate our common roots of forgiveness, our common roots of hope. I mean, it was really powerful for Sharon and their 2 children and the rest of the family to be here for a funeral for Charles Lind. You know, they were in Washington D.C. for their wedding anniversary, and they went walking all day, and they came home, and Charles lay down to sleep and never woke up. And imagine what it must have been like for Sharon. How difficult that must have been. Her brother-in-law was not too far away. Unfortunately, they were able to be there and help her through this. But wasn't it significant that Sharon could come back to this place, be embraced by this community, and loved and supported and helped in every way? This is what it means. We, as Christians, we come back to our roots. We come back to our roots. And we celebrate together, we grieve together, we care together, learn together, worship together, all